any span of human history, our population has gone in the last 3 decades from about 3 billion or so to about 6.6 billion today. So this is, I should say, 4 decades. And it's estimated that it's going to be about 9 billion in a few decades. Now, when you think about this, and in terms of who's going to be added to the world, a lot of the people are going to be poor. They're going to be trying to survive and make it out of poverty. So this is a collision course we're on in terms of having the capacity for basic necessities like drinking water. And then we're on another collision course in terms of environmental degradation and disaster. So when you think of these challenges, they come together in very unique ways in poverty. When you're in poverty, all of these things are local. You can't just put your windows up and drive away, right? So plastic bags means blocked sewage, and that means disease. Poverty also means making these impossible trade-offs, making trade-offs between consuming for the immediate, just to survive, and conserving for the middle term. So I need that wood in order to cook my next meal for the immediate term, but I also have to conserve those forests for the medium term. So these are the kinds of things that come into play in poverty, and I think we can learn a lot from studying it. And the solutions that we uncover can help all of us. And so that's what I do. I study poverty from the point of view of subsistence or poverty of consumers and entrepreneurs who live in this context. So I look at their life circumstances, how they interact with the marketplace, and so on. Now, I should tell you, I take a very bottom-up approach. So I start with these life circumstances. I start at a micro level and then build up my understanding from there. So that's very important. So we fly at a very low altitude. We fly where we hit the trees. We look at the life circumstances. We're not flying at a very high altitude. Now, why is that important? Why is it important to take this micro-level approach? It's really important because most of us can't relate to poverty. And so when I think of myself, I've never been poor. And I don't recall what it was to not be able to read or write. I think that's fair to say for most of us. And so when I think of myself, I think I'm the least qualified to be studying this. So I need to find a way to educate myself. I need to start from the bottom up. And that means developing this bottom-up understanding. It also means developing solutions from the bottom. I just want to point out that when we refer to these marketplaces, we refer to them as subsistence marketplaces. And the reason we do that is we want to recognize them as pre-existing marketplaces. They are individuals, communities, consumers, and entrepreneurs that we need to learn from in order to design solutions for. Okay? Now, in terms of poverty, it's interesting when I think of one of the most rational things that I ever heard in my life. I asked a very poor woman in a village, "Do you plan?" And she said, "Why should I plan? Why should I plan when I don't know where my next income is going to come from?" To me, planning is a good thing. I have a lot of certainty. I can take a lot of things for granted, and I'm not even aware of what I take for granted. So if I just take today, for example, I have good amenities. I knew how to get ready. I knew how to be here on time. Yes, 1 or 2 things can fail, but I have backup plans. But when you live in poverty, even a central consumption event like a square meal or preparing a square meal can have a lot of uncertainty. The staple food. What's the quality of that staple food going to be today? What's the quality of the water in which I cook that food? Right? And what about the energy to cook that food? So these are the kinds of issues that we face, that people face in poverty. Now, on the flip side, when you think of solutions, when you think of even simple products, they can have life-changing potential. So for me, a cell phone is a cell phone is a cell phone. But for somebody living in poverty in a village, if they have a sick child in the middle of the night and the doctor is miles away in a town, that's a lifeline. Either a neighbor or their household having a cell phone is a lifeline for them. Now, how do people make decisions in these marketplaces? If you take a poor urban area, you have the option of buying from a small retail store, a neighborhood retail store, who often will give you credit in times of need, but will charge higher prices than, say, a large reseller who's a few miles away. And so I asked a woman, I said, when you buy at this neighborhood retail store where she bought for credit, and she got credit from there, I asked her if she checks prices. And now, this is not a typical example, but I want to make a point. She said, well, no, I won't check prices. Imagine how the store owner would feel if I checked prices. Now, why is she saying that? Well, she buys on credit. She has crises after crisis. The neighborhood, that store owner essentially is willing to give that credit. He keeps record of the transaction. He marks up even more on generic products, and she knows he's doing that. Now, I can go in there and I can say, hey, wait a minute. That's not the rational thing to do. What you need to do is you need to stock up at the beginning of the month, and you need to go to the large reseller, and essentially you need to buy all your groceries at that time. That's the rational thing to do. Not necessarily. First of all, I said beginning of the month. That assumes a regular income. Secondly, if that woman essentially said, yeah, I'm going to go to the large reseller when I have money, she walks by the store, and the store owner calls her and says, well, repay my loan. And then you can go buy the large reseller, if he's nice, right? So she has to plan for the next crisis. She has to anticipate the next crisis and try to figure out what she's going to do. And so when the next crisis comes around, it's probably the neighborhood store owner who's going to give her credit. So these are some of the issues that we face, and the key point I want to make here is that I have to put aside what I think is rational. I have to put aside these labels. I have to put aside these preconceptions of what I think is rational when I go into this context. I have to essentially say, look, I have some expertise, I have some experience, but I have a lot of weaknesses when it comes to understanding poverty. And I'm going to be interacting with people who have a lot of weaknesses, but they are experts too at survival. And if I can do that, and if I can have that mutual learning mindset, then I think it becomes a synergistic learning experience. And so this is the point I want to make, that we have to essentially adopt this kind of a mindset, and we have to learn from these subsistence marketplaces in order to design solutions, perhaps for all of us. Now, how does a person run an enterprise in these contexts? We interviewed a woman who had essentially supported her family for 15 years in abject poverty. She didn't have much education, and actually she didn't even have much experience as a customer. They didn't have that much money. And one day her husband became dysfunctional. And so she had to start an enterprise. She had to make a living. And so she got a small loan. She was lucky to get a small loan, and she bought a cycle. And she decided to buy and transport large utensils from a few miles away from a reseller and then sell them in her community. And so she came up with this plan where people would sign up for this somewhat big ticket item. So they would sign up for a 15-month installment. They would get a small utensil just for signing up. And they would pay in installments and get the large utensil at the end of those 15 months. At the end of each month, she held a lottery. So somebody who was very lucky got that large utensil a little earlier. She went to all the family. She dealt only with women. And she said, look, don't count on your husband. You want to save for big events like your daughter's wedding, you take charge. And this is what you have to do. She inspired them with her own entrepreneurship. Now, this is no joke to run an enterprise in this context. Everybody wants a special deal, right? So everybody's saying, hey, cut the price for me. Give me that utensil. Give me this utensil. So she has to adhere to some general principles, but she has to keep customizing as well. And if she gives a discount for somebody, she better have a rationale. So somebody takes possession of the product and says, I'm not going to pay you, you must pay. No, I'm not going to pay you, you must pay. Whether they pay or not is not that important. But if the word gets out that she accepted it, then everybody's going to ask for that deal. So what does this woman need in order to run the enterprise? Well, first of all, she needs to know the trade. Secondly, she needs know-how. How do I set a price? How do I promote the product, and so on? But she also needs know why. Why should I be customer-oriented? Why should I be in business, in this particular business, and not some other business? These are things that we call marketplace literacy. So it's not basic literacy. It's awareness of rights, it's skills in the marketplace, it's self-confidence, it's those intangibles that people need in order to be an informed consumer or be an entrepreneur as well. So just to give you one more example, A poor woman essentially says, well, I know how to cook, I'm going to start a food shop. So she starts a food shop right next to where she lives. So she needs to know how to cook. She needs know-how to set the menu, to set the prices, but she also needs know why. Maybe she should not locate the shop in that particular place. Maybe she should not be having a food shop at all. She should instead buy ingredients, or rather make ingredients, and sell it to the hotels nearby. Maybe she should be delivering to the middle-class households nearby. Or maybe it's the wrong business to be in. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get that poor woman to think a little bit more broadly. And we want her to be able to say, hey, wait a minute. If I understand how marketplaces work and why they work, then I may be able to adapt to the next changing circumstances that are around the corner. Instead of saying, I know how to cook, this is what I'm going to do. So the way we think about it is, in order for a poor person to participate in the marketplace as a consumer or as an entrepreneur, they need market access, particularly in rural areas. They need financial resources, but they also need this thing we call marketplace literacy. Now, what we've tried to do is we've created a program where we use role plays, we simulate mistakes that people make, and so on, and we're trying to get people to understand how marketplaces work and why they work, and hopefully be able to change to different conditions. We've used some video-based learning experiences to try to reach larger audiences. It's very much an attempt right now. But if we want to really make this a complete experience, we have to incorporate environmental sustainability in terms of sustainable consumption and sustainable production. Now, the moment I use this word, we all have this image of sustainability. We have our own definitions. But if I take that definition and impose it, I think I've missed the point. I need to first learn and listen as to what it is that person at the bottom is trying to sustain. Is it the culture? Is it the local economy? And so on. Now, I just wanted to mention we've come full circle, and we've brought this back into the curriculum right here, where we have a course at the University of Illinois where students from all over campus essentially go on international immersion trips and try to find solutions for these contexts. We also have a shorter module where our incoming undergraduates in their very first semester are challenged to learn about this context and come up with solutions. But in each case, they take a bottom-up approach, and they essentially adopt this mutual learning mindset. Now, no matter where we live, we need sustainable technologies and sustainable solutions to face some of the challenges that we have ahead. And I think we can do that by learning a lot from poverty. But to do that, we need to take a bottom-up approach and adopt a mutual learning mindset so that we can learn from subsistence marketplaces in order to design solutions for all of us. And part of the solution is going to be education for subsistence marketplaces and about them as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity.